Because the information in Daniel 7 is a bit ambiguous, I'm going to skip to the more obvious allegories and hope that this gives me some ideas. Chapter 8 is a vision by Daniel. He claims he had this vision during the Babylonian Empire. This chapter introduces two beasts. The first beast is a ram-like beast with two horns. The longer horn is said to be younger than the shorter horn, but is clearly more powerful. Daniel later explains that this beast is the empire of the Persians and Medes, the Persians being the bigger horn and the Medes being the smaller horn. He's clearly talking about the Achaemenid Empire, which existed roughly between 550 and 330 BCE. The Medes were a previous empire. They're ethnically similar to the Persians, but the Persians took over the empire of the Medes in around 559 BCE. The second beast is said to have one horn and comes from the west. This beast kills the first beast, but in the process, its single horn breaks off. This is followed by 4 other horns sprouting from the head of the beast. Later in this book, Daniel explains this beast to be an allegory of the Greeks, and essentially he's talking about the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great. Alexander dies in 323, and his empire breaks into several kingdoms. This author claims only 4 kingdoms came from Alexander. That's not quite right, but it's close enough to give the author a pass. There were multiple kingdoms, but only a few big ones. The Daniel author is probably talking about Macedonia, Pergamum, the Seleucid Empire, and the Ptolemaic Empire. Now, from one of these following kingdoms apparently comes a king that the author doesn't like so much. There is little evidence as to who exactly this king is, but it says this is during the latter part of their reign, meaning that these kingdoms are about to be wiped out. This king that the author is alluding to is likely Antiochus Epiphanes, one of the latter kings of the Seleucid Empire. The area of Palestine and Syria are constantly being fought over by the Seleucids and Ptolemies of Egypt. Antiochus Epiphanes is in control of the Seleucid Empire around 175 to 164 BCE. He invades the empire of the Ptolemies in Egypt and beats them up pretty good, but in the process there's a revolt in Judea. Antiochus ends up crushing the revolt in Judea, he sacks Jerusalem, and he installs his own man as high priest in Jerusalem. This would be very problematic for the Seleucids later, and the book of Daniel alludes to the idea that the king used deceit and sets himself up as something close to a god. In around 167 BCE, Judea revolted again under Judah Maccabees. Antiochus Epiphanes would die in around 164 BCE, and within a few years the kingdom of Judea would become semi-autonomous. This chapter clearly states that the king came from one of the empires of Alexander, and Antiochus IV would certainly be worth writing about, so while I'll certainly keep an eye out for other possibilities, Antiochus Epiphanes certainly fits the bill. But there is one curious thing about this chapter that I need to mention. The fact that the author knows that the Greek empires are about to be wiped out by the Romans and Parthians points to a significantly later date. This author obviously knows of a time when the Seleucids no longer exist. I'll have to keep an eye out for variations and see if I can break this into multiple authors, but at this point I seriously doubt that I'm working with one author, and the time frame he's talking about is significantly later than I'd previously expected.